Good morning, students. Welcome to your English 1 class today. Today I'll be doing English 1 with you and lesson 3, that is Gopal and the Hilsa fish. Okay, the objectives I will send you in writing, and I'm sure this lesson is going to be very interesting for you because it is in the form of a comic. You know what a comic is? Yes, many students they take from the library. You take many comics. There are many comics available in the library. Now somehow students do not tend to read comics or books. Yes, when we were young we used to read a lot of comics, different varieties of comics. So this is also one kind of a story, like in the form of a comic. So hope you will find it interesting. The upcoming video is, you will have a picture in front of you and you will just be able to listen to the sound of my voice. So please listen and try to enjoy the story and try to understand. Even after the lesson is over, you can read the story again. Yes, so it's about Gopal and the Hilsa fish. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so welcome to today's lesson, Gopal and the Hilsa fish. Like I told you in my introductory video about comic books, so before you read is mentioned here. Have you ever read a comic book? A comic book contains stories told mainly through pictures, and comics are meant usually for children, but sometimes even adults like to read comics. As example, me, I also like to read comics. I prefer comics sometimes with pictures. Pictures makes it easier for a child to understand what the story is about. Yeah, sometimes a child who does not even know how to read will go through a comic book, and by just looking at the pictures he or she can make out what the story is about. So here also we have pictures in the story, and we have also some bubbles. Bubbles means speech bubbles. They are called speech bubbles, where they show an arrow, a round bubble kind of a thing, and an arrow going down to the person who's saying that. Okay, so you can see in the story or in this comic extract about people speaking, direct speech. So let's come to the first picture. It was the season for Hilsa fish. Fishermen could think of nothing but Hilsa fish. Fishermen, they could think of nothing but Hilsa. Do you know Hilsa fish? Every house or rather an Assamese house or a house where Bengalis live, they love this Hilsa fish. It's one of the most favorite fishes of many people in the northeast. Yes, in the northeast, especially in Bengal, in Assam, people love to eat Hilsa fish. And this Hilsa fish is not a very cheap fish. It's quite an expensive fish. We also call it ilish mas. I think you must be knowing it. Yes, sometimes mummy makes it like bhapa. Yes, bhapa, steamed. So that's the way that people here in the northeast, we eat that kind of fish, and it's one very expensive fish, and people can go crazy with this fish. Crazy in the sense they're so happy to eat it. So it was the season for Hilsa fish. Season means is not available throughout the year. It's only one particular season where we have plenty of Hilsa fish. Fishermen could think of nothing but Hilsa fish. Fishermen, why? Why do you think fishermen could think of nothing but Hilsa fish? Because this would bring them maximum amount of earning. They would get plenty of money by selling Hilsa fish. And so fishermen were very happy when this season came. Second picture, fishmongers sold nothing but Hilsa fish. Fishmongers, people who sell fish, they sold nothing but Hilsa fish. Come, buy, the price of Hilsa is down today, they would shout in the market. Fishmongers are trying to attract the buyers by shouting, come, Hilsa fish is down today. Down today means the price is little less, so people would rush. Householders could talk of nothing but Hilsa fish. Picture 3. Householders means people living in the house or families could talk of nothing but Hilsa fish. How much did you pay for that Hilsa? You wouldn't believe it if I told you. This man is telling this woman. This woman is seeing the Hilsa fish and she's asking him, how much did you pay for it? And he said, oh, you wouldn't believe if I told you. So maybe he got it very cheap. Fourth picture. And in the palace too, the courtiers could discuss nothing but Hilsa fish. In the fourth picture, you see a king and a fan being blown towards him by a servant maybe, and his courtiers in front of him talking to him, and they too could talk of nothing but Hilsa fish. So everybody's mind only Hilsa fish was there. Yes, Your Majesty, you should have seen the huge Hilsa I caught. It was... And he could not even complete his sentence. The king became angry. It's not the king's work to talk about Hilsa fish the whole day. So he became quite annoyed with his... You can see by the look on his face that he became quite annoyed with this courtier talking about Hilsa fish, just like a common man. So that made the king quite annoyed. Let's move on to the next page. So the king was quite angry, annoyed with the courtier for talking about Hilsa fish. And then before the courtier could finish his sentence, the king shouted, "Stop it!" You can see the picture there in your books. Please don't depend on the picture on your phone. Please look at the book as I am reading. So he said, "Stop it. Are you a courtier or a fisherman?" He asked that courtier who was talking about Hilsa fish. He became angry. The courtier fell silent with downcast eyes. The king felt guilty. The courtier then he felt very ashamed. He became very, very quiet. And with downcast eyes means he looked down. He could not see eye to eye with the king. So he looked down, like you can see in the picture. His hands are joined together and he's looking down. Maybe his eyes are also closed. And then the king felt very guilty. The king felt very bad because he had shouted at his courtier. So from this we can say that this king is a very kind-hearted man. Yes, a very kind-hearted man. He's not a cruel king. Because he felt guilty, he felt bad for shouting at the courtier. "I'm sorry, I lost my temper. It is the season for Hilsa fish and no one..." So he began to tell all his courtiers something. He said, "I'm very, very sorry I lost my temper. I'm very sorry that I got angry with you. It is because it is the season for Hilsa fish and no one, not even Gopal, can stop anyone from talking about Hilsa fish. Not even for 5 minutes." And he says, "I'm so sorry, but then it is the season for Hilsa fish and Nobody can stop talking about Hilsa fish, and especially even Gopal." So let's see, Gopal is the main hero of the story, no? So he says, even Gopal can't stop anyone from talking about Hilsa fish. Even for 5 minutes, Gopal, who is so clever, who is so witty. If you have read Birbal stories, Birbal was a very, very clever courtier, and the emperor used to ask him for advice. So he used to help the king, Akbar. So here it is Gopal, and so he says even Gopal can't stop anyone from talking about Hilsa fish. And Gopal says, "Oh, I think I could, Your Majesty." Look at Gopal's face, he's smiling there and says, "Oh no, my king, Your Majesty, I think I can stop making people stop talking about Hilsa fish." Then the king puts a challenge to him and he says, "Then let me see you buy a huge Hilsa and bring it to the palace without anyone asking you a word about it. I accept your challenge, Your Majesty." So in the last picture of this page 37, you will see the king is putting forward a challenge to Gopal, and the challenge is that Gopal has to buy a huge Hilsa fish and bring it to the palace, and while he brings it to the palace, nobody should ask him a single question, nobody should ask him anything about the Hilsa fish. And very happily, very readily, Gopal said, "I accept your challenge, Your Majesty. I accept. I will do it. You will see. You have put a challenge to me. I will take up your challenge and I will bring a Hilsa fish to the palace without anyone asking me a thing about it." He said this to the king. Okay. So I hope it is clear. Let's move on to the next page. Please continue keeping your books open. So now coming to page 38. So now the king has put this challenge to Gopal, and so Gopal did not do the challenge immediately. He waited for a few days. So a few days later, page 38, a few days later, we see the husband and the wife, Gopal and his wife, in the first picture. And the wife is asking her husband Gopal, "Why is your face half shaven?" Half shaven means he has shaved his face only half. Half he has left it. "I'm dressing up to buy a fish," Gopal says. I'm dressing up to buy a fish. And his wife is thinking, what's wrong with my husband? What has happened to him? What's the matter with you? Why are you smearing yourself with ash? So after having shaven his face only half, then he began to put ash. You know ash? Ash is burnt wood. When we burn wood, we get ash. A raak, it is called in Hindi, raak. So he began to smear it on his face. Began to smear means he began to put the ash on his face. What's the matter with you? Why are you smearing yourself with ash? I told you I'm dressing to buy a Hilsa fish. And so Gopal wouldn't say anything to her. He just said that I'm dressing to buy a Hilsa fish. I told you already, I'm dressing up for that. Listen to me. So in the third picture, he is going out. Listen to me, please. You can't possibly go out in those disgraceful rags. What are you up to? How many times must I tell you, woman? I am out to buy a huge Hilsa fish. So now, after having shaven his face half, after smearing his face with ash, then what did he do? He wore rags. Rags like you can see in the picture, torn clothes, bare feet without any chappals on his feet and torn all patches on his clothes. He wore that. And then his wife began to shout at him, told him, please listen to me. You can't go out in those disgraceful, horrible rags. What are you up to? And then again he says, I've told you, woman, I'm going out to buy a Hilsa fish. And then his wife is standing at the door in the last picture and she can see her husband going out of the gate. And look at the speech bubble there, no? There's a speech bubble. Now this speech bubble is not the same as the other bubbles. Why? Because in this particular speech bubble, in the last picture of page 38, she is not speaking it, she is thinking it. And when you are thinking it in the comics, they put like this kind of bubbles. It's a different kind of bubbles because it is her thoughts. She's thinking. And then she's thinking to herself, it's happened to him. He's gone mad. She was convinced that her husband had become mad. Looking at him going out through the gate. And she became quite kind of worried for her husband. So there were 3 things that he did. First, he half shaved his face. Second, he smeared his face with ash. And third, he wore rags. And all to buy a Hilsa fish. But he did not tell the actual reason to his wife. Today we'll stop here. And in the next class, I shall continue the rest of the pictures. Please read the story once again. I will be sending you some homework, written homework. You will write down and send me in Google Classroom. Bye.